Thank you, Arnold. Thank you, Paolo. Thank you, Gaetano. Thank you, Arunjari. In this paper, I will give an overview of the 4 chapters in my novella, A Leopard's Kiss, discuss forms and genres in the text, and reflect upon my relationship with Sicilian culture at different stages of my life, and how this affected and influenced the shaping of this novella. Chapter 1, Roosters' Clear Throats. Roosters' clear throats, badon cantadas. A herd of goats zigzags the rocky terrain. The church campanile bells the morning in. Vespers mosquito past, Fiat's crunch gears. Girls and rosary beads, their lipsticks in flame. Chapter 1, Rooster Clears Throats, depicts the 1950s Sicilian mountain village overlooking the Mediterranean. It is a world peopled with Vespa riding boys wanting to impress girls, mothers calling children from baroque balconies, men in card games and moustaches, priests and church bells, and the realization that daughters and sons must leave to begin lives in Australia and the other side of the world. As well as prose, I write Japanese haiku. It's an elegant, subtle form constructed in present tense over 1 to 3 lines. This influenced my choice of present tense couplets to create here and now moments. It's as if these migrants from the 1950s are currently sitting in their Australian lounge rooms retelling their village lives. Their memories are precise and crystal clear, closer to yesterday than 65 years ago. The ritornello at the end of each page, when those who must leave us sleep, that goodbye kiss, is inspired by traditional folk songs I would hear my mother singing as she cooked our meals, washed the dishes, hoovered the lounge room, and hung out the clothes on her new Il's hoist. Traditional folk songs are inherent in many Sicilians who migrated to Australia in the 1950s. The majority had left agricultural landscapes, and they had worked in the fields, and they had sung. Chapter 2, Like His Father's Father's Father. Today, the Prince thinks is the day he will begin work on his novel. The story of his father's father's father must be told. The story of the great Prince of Lampedusa, Giulio. After all, Prince Giuseppe agrees with himself, he, Giuseppe Tomasi di Lampedusa, is the final child of an illustrious aristocratic bloodline. He is the 11th and the very last prince of Lampedusa. He is the very, very last of all his relatives to maintain a beloved clarity for the vero past. La storia della famiglia must be written before it dissolves into dusk and is swept away with the sirocco. Chapter 2, Like His Father's Father's Father, travels to Palermo and into the rarefied literary world of Giuseppe Tomasi da Lampedusa with his wife, Alessandra Wolff, and his cousin, poet Lucio Piccolo. In this chapter, the genesis of Lampedusa's novel, Il Gattopardo, takes form. We stroll through Lampedusa's days, drafting his manuscript, visiting Mazzara Cafe, spending weekends with Lucio in Capodorlando, visiting the mountain village in chapter 1, and the disappointment of rejection letters ensuring his novel would not be published in his lifetime. As Il Gattopardo is prose, I chose prose to capture Lampedusa's artistic journey. However, I wanted to add those unofficial bits of writing and thinking an artist does, therefore augmenting the narrative with comprehensive to-do lists, scenes of procrastination, the slightest distractions, and doodles when words evade the author. The playful influence of commedia dell'arte sculpts the tone of the chapter, and with the melancholic and absurd elements of Lampedusa's life as a prince in a city drenched in financial instability, his palace in need of urgent repair, his literary efforts unappreciated, and shaping him into a southern Italian curiosity. During a more recent return to Sicily, I visited Palermo and began to trace Lampedusa's footsteps. I was thrilled to discover he had spent so much time in the area where my parents had grown up, due to his close relationship with his cousins in Capodorlando. This merging of place and character, of family with literary royalty, provided the vital link for my novella and created more sense of self and identity within me. Chapter 3, Where the Village Hangs its Breasts. She pronounces your name with rounded lips, not broken, not pointed, nor defective or scanty. She pronounces your name with a revolving motion. She's a cop allowing traffic to circulate continuously. She pronounces your name with pleasure, every movement equidistant from the center of her red mouth. Her voice coils inside you, cruising and purring until the end. Papa, we were married today. I think how much you must miss Mama. I pray to her every night. We send these photos of the wedding. Tomorrow, I move to the sugar farm too. It is many kilometers from the town. Chapter 3, Where the Village Hangs its Breasts, returns to the mountain village and young lovers appear, Fearless Francesco and Musica Marcella. Fearless leaves for a life in Australia. Musica awaits his letters and wishes they will be reunited soon. 3 years later, the couple's deep love is set against the back-breaking work of cutting sugarcane in North Queensland. These difficulties put them on a train to Melbourne, which so many migrants deemed as the miracle city, offering them factory work and a paid-off palace of their own, a brick veneer home in the northern suburbs. This chapter is a combination of free verse and letter fragments. The poems were kindled by a series of black and white snapshots of my parents' years in North Queensland. In each frame, the young lover's sense of adventure and happiness is overwhelming. When visiting my parents in the last years of their lives, we would sit and talk about these photographs. Out of their words, apropos those photos, these poems emerged. Numerous stories of migrant journeys concentrate on hardships rather than deep romantic love. There were images and talk of my father too scrawny for cane cutting in a white singlet, brill-creamed 50s quip, eating a plate of spaghetti. But overall, the collection was very sensual. Photos of this young couple canoodling, holding each other's waists, cycling together, lying by flower beds, on the beach in bathing costumes, kissing, piggybacking, hands laced as they raced towards the waves. The shots resonated with deep passion, I believe, equipoised the difficulties embedded in their migrant journey. The letter fragments, which further fuel the narrative in this chapter, are homage to all migrants who until the 1960s could only communicate by letter with their loved ones living abroad or back in the home country. Chapter 4, A Leopard's Kiss. I meet Darren H. behind the train station. I tell him about the kisses in that stupid Leopard movie. He practices the kisses on me. He likes the tongue one best. We catch a later train. Heidi Zed's with her boyfriend Jeff P. He's an apprentice roof tiler. He's got a Kingswood station wagon with purple curtains on the sides. Look deep into his eyes and see his cities. The Leopard is the story of a powerful aristocratic family destroyed by social and political changes beyond its control. Discuss. Chapter 4, A Leopard's Kiss, sits within the Anglo-dominated Malcolm Fraser political era, when multiculturalism had not yet morphed into the all-embracing Al Brasby definition. It is in Melbourne in the late 70s. Francesco and Musica are dealing with a rebellious teenage daughter who prefers the name Jojo to her given name Giuseppina, who prefers her bedroom to large Italian family interactions, who prefers British and Australian pop music to traditional folk songs from Sicily. Ironically, in trying to dodge her Sicilian identity, Jojo is further confronted with having to study the monolithic masterpiece Il Gattopardo at school, which she does not understand and grows to despise due to a ridiculing teacher who delves into unfair, stereotypical generalizations about Sicilians whilst the class studies the novel. This chapter blends short prose, couplets and mock essay questions parodying those discussed in high school when studying Lampedusa's novel. The couplets return in Chapter 4 to bookend A Leopard's Kiss. However, a picaresque rogue voice enters the narrative, making the prose and couplets more estranged and combative. My choice of the picaresque for Jojo's character represents the generational clashes between post-war migrants and their teenage children from the 60s to the 1980s. These teenagers grew up with freedoms and temptations unimaginable to their parents' generation and to their despair. My own English cultural sensibility and anti-Sicilian identity endured well into my 20s. I then travelled to Italy. I had not visited since I was 8 years old, and to my surprise, embarrassment and shame, I found so much I had dismissed, shirked, evaded and rejected to be just as, if not more, culturally and artistically inspiring. To understand a poet such as Lucio Piccolo had known my father, that Lampedusa had habitually visited the area, that a rich literary landscape had been generated out of these mountains, these seas, and work habits and social lives. The 1990s became about injecting this history into my determination to be a writer. The path was set from that moment, that awakening into my rich origins, and I felt I had no choice but to continue this commitment, to put the story to paper and to make the trip each morning to my desk. Thank you.